I'm going to start the recording.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Bill.
Thank you, Yarek. It's great to be back. I know the context here is assessment, and I know you just received a very technical topic, and I caught the tail end of that, and there's some great technical, and you were definitely in the weeds. So I hope you'll indulge me a fairly large shift of gears here, because what I want to do is I want to talk about how we get to badging as it relates to assessment, because I think that's a critical piece of this. Lots and lots of schools and lots of other institutions are playing around with badging, but I don't know very many yet who are playing around with badging in the same context that we are, and that is in support of assessment as sort of the standard for measuring student progress and success and learning. And my group at Bakersfield College, the Academic Technology Department, has spent a considerable amount of time and energy with research and the development of authentic assessment. And we're working in direct assessment with some of the CBE initiatives. But the commonality between all of these ideas of assessment is huge. And the potential for changing sort of the way we think about learning and the way we think about especially measuring learning and the way we represent learning to other institutions or job markets or employers or just about anyone out there who's outside of our institution, the potential for this is huge, and badges are sort of the vehicle we're looking at. So with that framing, I'm just gonna kind of jump in at a high level, and then we've got plenty of time here to get down to sort of the nitty gritty of things, and then I'll happily take questions as you have them, or at the end, whichever the case may be. I'll try and keep an eye on my chat window as I'm doing this. But my wife will tell you I'm not a great multitasker, so you'll just have to bear with me as I do the best I can. So I'm going to share my screen now and get some slides up. And some of you may have been around for my previous presentation this week on a similar topic. The nice thing that we have here is the ability to go a little bit deeper, because in that presentation, I had only 20 minutes and wound up skipping a lot of my favorite parts and not getting down to the real meat, I guess, of the presentation, which is how are we doing this? So just to start, we often think about higher ed in terms of an institutional centric sort of view of things. And we have our students that fit in, and we started out very, very narrow in terms of the type of student that we as in higher education allowed into the institution. Over time, we expanded our view, and even today we have initiatives targeting diversity and equity and inclusion in our institutions. But really, if you think about it, in terms of our institutional view and how we address DEI initiatives, even, our views are really still too narrow, because our problem is that we put the institution at the center of everything. And so when we look at our students and what our students are really like, what we see is this huge mismatch still. We can't figure out how to address all of these really unique needs of all of these really unique people. And we try really hard. We try all of these initiatives that market themselves as sort of high touch initiatives. But as long as we put the institution at the center, we're going to be getting it wrong. So what I would propose, and what we've been talking about a lot with guided pathways, is how can we put the student at the center of what we do and develop needs around them. So we have the student in the middle, and we develop academic support in sort of a modular way. We have authentic assessment efforts, which really allow for a equity-based or equity-minded teaching approach, right? Because authentic assessment doesn't say, here's the measure, how well do you measure up to it? It says, how can you as an individual express learning in a way that's unique and meaningful to you? We have direct assessment, which both different kinds of assessment, of obviously different flavors, but we're talking about something completely different. When we talk about direct assessment, we're talking about, of course, competency-based education, and the idea that our assessment is we're assessing those skills directly, and we're focused on the mastery of those skills and those specific learning outcomes, as opposed to just sort of measuring how long you sit in a seat while we talk about it. We've got flexible scheduling now with a variety of different classes and modalities and ways of doing things. We've got case management approaches, things like Starfish and other technologies that allow us almost the ability of a customer resource management software that allow us to measure and track and follow up with students on an individual level. Personalized instruction has been on the map for us for 20 years. I mean, my gosh, it's been around forever, but the whole nature of personalized instruction has changed completely, from this idea that computers were going to magically figure out how to teach each individual person in a way that's meaningful to them, to a way of just humanizing education and humanizing learning to allow students to participate as their authentic selves. We've got equity-based instruction, which is, another cousin of these things, but the equity-based instruction could cover everything from how we talk to students all the way to using mobile device aware learning materials so that students who can't afford a computer have access to our online courses. And the one I want to talk about today, of course, is the idea of a badged transcript. And you'll see through this conversation why that's such a game changer, and also more importantly, maybe for this group, how that ties into assessment. So a little bit of background really quick. In the 1900s, the United States was going through what we call the Second Industrial Revolution. We had things like Ford's assembly line. We started giving standardized tests to the military to measure things like intelligence and leadership potential and all this stuff. We were very big into things like efficiency, mass production, standardizing. Of course, when we say standardizing, we say we're standardizing to the white male ideal here, because, obviously that's who created all of these things, which is part of the problem now, right? We have consistency, numbers, quantitative results. Those things were seen as superior in many ways to qualitative sorts of things, because what we were all about in the United States was scale, and we wanted to scale everything up, including education. And so in 1906, we created something called the Carnegie Unit. And the Carnegie Unit has been around for quite a while. In fact, a report that was given to the US Department of Education says about the Carnegie Unit, things like that it's being re-examined, it's outmoded. Do the changes in the number and type of pupils attending in high school and college relationships, to name only a few, call for new methods and instruments of pupil evaluation and accounting? Obviously, highly critical of the Carnegie Unit, which isn't a surprise because it's so old. However, the real surprise might be that this report was actually given in 1954. Just 48 years after the invention of the Carnegie Unit. And if you're good at math, 67 years ago still. So we have a problem, right? Because the Carnegie Unit just won't go away. And it's universal. It's almost in every piece of our education, we're still trying to talk about units and how important units are. And units provide the basis for this lovely document, right, which is a college transcript. But let's talk about this for a moment and the value of transcript. So this is what we have. This is just like any other transcript you might see. right? We've got the name of the school, the degree, the date it was given. We have the courses along with their, yes, Carnegie unit values and the letter grade that was received in each course. And down here, we have the total number of units taken and the GPA. I just want to point out, yes, that's real. I didn't fake that. Although the authentication is still here. This is the thing that the registrar stamps on here to help everybody understand that that's real. And if you combine that with the void watermark that's all over this thing because it was a scan, then you'll see that that's the level of security that we all trust, and we accept that as proof that this came from a real legitimate academic institution. The problem is that a transcript is really a bad way of talking about what somebody has learned. If you look at this transcript, you can see that I got a Master of Arts in Educational Technology. So you can kind of think about that, and you can see that I had a class called Vert Camp. I had a class called Collaborative Action Research, and I had a class, Technology and Curriculum, the Practicing Professional, Managing Technology in School Settings. But what does that enable me to do exactly? What things can I perform, or what jobs might I be good at if I have this degree? You can't really tell. You can see that I had 30 units of credit and that I did well in my classes, which means, how you can kind of guess how long I probably sat in a seat listening to lectures or working on things. But is there more to it than that? Can you tell anything else? And that's the problem, other than the fact that this is institution owned. If I wanted to get a real copy of this, an official transcript, as they say, I have to go beg the institution. And to add insult to injury, after paying all of that money to Pepperdine University, which by the way, isn't cheap, they want me to pay $12 more for every official copy of this transcript I get. That's my transcript. What are they doing charging me for my transcript? It's not portable. I can't really do anything with it. If I want a real official copy, I have to have that sent directly to the recipient. So it's really, really official, so that, I can't tamper with it or do anything. It's not portable. I can't include it as part of an official resume or change the format of the data or use that data for anything. So doesn't really have any good meaning. It's certainly not flexible. It's a piece of paper. And if it's not a physical piece of paper, it's like a PDF document, which is the electronic equivalent of a piece of paper in terms of usefulness. To me, it's just boring. And maybe that's a bridge too far, right, in academia to criticize something for being boring, but I think we can do better. And by the way, where's the assessment? How do I even know, if I look at somebody's transcript, whether there was rigor in these classes or what I had to do to prove that I'm an expert in technology and curriculum? You don't know. You don't know if I had to do anything at all other than sit in a seat for 50 hours or whatever I did. So all in all, our current system of things is very antiquated and it's very low resolution, right? It's like this picture. Now, if you kind of squint or if you stand pretty far back from your screen, you could probably guess what this is a picture of, right? You can see maybe it's like a pink flower with yellow somewhere in the middle, and it's got some greenery in the background. But the lack of detail is limiting your view of this picture. So what I'm proposing is we need to develop a higher resolution solution for how we represent academic credit in higher education. And the solution I'm proposing is based on the idea of badges. Now, you know that these badges go back to the Boy Scouts. They used to wear them on a sash, and a badge, a merit badge, as these are called, simply is a representation of something that you've learned according to a standard. It's all in the Boy Scout manual. What you have to do to earn each merit badge is pretty well defined, and you can look that up. These aren't the badges that I'm talking about for higher education, although it might be fun to walk around with a sash with all your academic achievements on it. I could maybe get behind that. But this is the kind of badge I'm talking about, and it's called a micro-credential. And this badge is an image file that contains metadata, which is just invisible data that's embedded in the file that can contain the following fields. So I can say who received it, who issued it, when was it issued, the criteria for issuance. So I'm thinking SLOs, assessment, learning objectives, the link to the evidence. I can actually, if the student's work that they use to satisfy this badge is online, I can link the URL directly to that work inside the badge. So somebody can see when they got it, how they got it, and they can review the work that the student performed. Now that's a complete solution. I can include standards alignment. If your brain is going to CIDs and ASTs and standardized curriculum, that's a possibility. We have several other standards though that we can align with. And an expiration date if there is one. So if it's a certification that needs to be renewed, these badges can actually expire. So there's a lot of great data, and there are actually some other fields in there, but I think these are the most interesting for our purposes here. And all of that data is in the badge, and it goes with it. And I can give you, just like a physical object, I can take that badge. Upon awarding it to a student, I can give that student the ability to download a copy of that badge, which they can keep on their phone, they can keep on their computer, they can embed it in a resume or an email or upload it to a job application site to use as a basis for filtering jobs. They can use it for articulating this course or this degree program to another degree program. Because guess what? We have higher resolution data in there. What do we use for articulation right now? We typically use a transcript, a course catalog description. It's not very high resolution data, but if I had a picture of what skills or what learning objectives or what SLOs a student satisfied in the completion of a course, then I have the ability to talk very, very accurately in a very detailed way about that course, which enables all sorts of things related to credit for prior learning. It relates to articulation and transfer. So there's a lot there. And so badges give us transparency of learning and assessment compared to our current transcript. I can actually see what the student did or how they earned that badge. They're portable, they're student-centered because the student owns their own academic credentials. And for those of you who are wondering, can these be falsified? The answer is no, because the embedded, the field that says that who granted the credential is actually tied back to an official institutional record that's been validated and authenticated as an institution. So it's very difficult, and I hate to say anything is impossible, but it's very, very difficult to falsify these. It's a higher resolution picture of learning. So we're getting at a more granular level. So if I look at this geography B3 badge, this is a course level badge, I could actually have badges below this level that represent student learning outcomes. Or I can just tie this badge to a set of skills that represent what you learned in that course. I can include the SLOs or the course objectives as criteria for earning this badge. So it's easy to see. People can drill down from the program level to the course level to the sub-course level to see what that student really did and actually get an idea of the rigor of the class. And better forward compatibility. We talk about backward compatibility of innovations all the time. But when we're talking about something that I hope one day will replace the Carnegie unit, we have to think about, is this something that can be around and can be used by the technologies that we have 100 years from now without holding things back? And so it's got great forward compatibility because of the granular nature, because of the flexibility of the data embedded in them, and because they're built on an open platform that isn't owned by a specific company. It's an open source platform, and it's an open standard that several different companies are participating in. We happen to be using Badger as our platform, and they are my favorite, but there are several companies out there working with the open badging standard. Most importantly, though, I think that badges provide us a great opportunity for a mastery-oriented approach, because what you'll notice that I didn't include in the badge data were two things. I didn't include the Carnegie units, and I didn't include a letter grade, mostly because I think both of those things are detrimental to learning. And I am a huge advocate and a huge supporter of the ungrading movement and the idea that we can move toward a mastery-based idea of learning that fits beautifully with our assessment practices and with a better way of teaching students. The bummer about a lot of our assessment work right now is that we complete the cycle of assessment. We assess our students, and then we do the reflection, and then we feed it back into our institution for the purpose of enhancing our practices. But we don't share it with students very often. And I think that that's a sort of a waste. We're talking about really authentic assessment practices. We're talking about engaging with student learning in real and meaningful ways. And then we turn around and give them a letter grade, which is a total proxy measure for how well they did in the class. Wouldn't it be great if we get to a point where we're reflecting back to students how they did on each individual SLO? I mean, the ACCJC requires that we put SLOs on our syllabi, but how often do we spend time actually telling the students how they performed on each of those SLOs? I think it happens very rarely, if ever.
Bill, could I ask a question here?
Yes, absolutely.
I tell you, you're just bringing a ton of information. This is really every single statement you make, there is a discussion there that needs to be taking place. So
sorry about that.
No, not at all. I'm extremely grateful. This is just very, very inspirational. The question that I would have is when you just said it, right, that we keep putting the institution at the center of all our endeavors, and then we tend to blame students that they don't understand the system, right? That this is,
yes,
come on, okay, we do everything we can, right, for you, and you're still not there. What's the story here? Or there's, faculty don't understand the data, right, about their students, that faculty should be more inviting to the classroom. Yet again, it's the same grind. It's sort of like, reminds me of this visit to a dentist who is very nice, and I know that she likes to run with the dogs on the beach on the weekend. It's still a visit to a dentist, kind of thing. So that's my thinking about it. So again, I'm really appreciative of this take. But the question that I would have, okay, so what do we do? Because we just had a discussion about a possibility of looking for funding for competency-based or SLO oriented activities. The question is, okay, so what are we going to say if we are going to measure student academic achievement, or actually competency and skill attainment, in a different way that is not going to be reflective with a GPA or course completion, right? Who out there in the academia, in their right mind, is going to give us money for an endeavor such as this one, right? I mean, we are going to focus on student learning.
Yeah, that's a great question. And here's kind of my thinking around this, and it's new enough that I am still, I would say I'm still very open to ideas and collaboration with other folks. But my thinking about this is that, number one, if we want to affect real change here, because we're not the first people to try and destroy the Carnegie unit. It's been done. It's been done for 100 years, 115 years, right? We've been trying to get rid of this thing almost as long as we've had it. We're not going to just do that with a revolutionary change. We're not going to one day come along and have a big conference where we'd say to everybody, okay, next week we're dumping the Carnegie unit, right? The Carnegie unit is everywhere. It's embedded into all of our systems, our curriculum systems, and our apportionment. And my gosh, it's everywhere. It's insidious. So it's going to take a long time and a coordinated effort to get rid of that. But there are some things that I think we can do that build up a structure that allows us to transition. And so what I'm saying is we sort of have to develop a parallel structure that can exist with the Carnegie unit so that people can see this new structure, this new idea, this new way of doing things is actually better and it's viable. And it has to be viable for a long time. I'm not talking about a change that I'm even likely to see in the scope of my career. I'm just hoping to lay a few bricks for the foundation, so to speak. Enrique, I'll get to you in just one second, but I want to start down this road just a little bit. Actually, Enrique, what's your question? Let's just see what you got.
So just Bill, just get it down to the greedy and needy here. Jarek has a 4.0 from Pepperdine University. You're the employer. Enrique has a 3.0, and I have all the badges, all the skills that was given to me by Bakersfield. I have all the skills and competencies that you can see what I did. What were my skills, my mastery levels, and what have you, versus Jarek with a degree of a 4.0 GPA. What would you have? And who would you hire?
Honestly, I like the idea of skills, but hopefully we won't have that sort of comparison. I would say, Enrique, that I might find out about the person with the skills easier and faster. It'll allow them to make connections with jobs that somebody with a traditional transcript might not even have. But I mean, that's just one small piece of it. And I do think it'll take a while, but you have lots and lots of companies right now that are using these huge skills databases to filter potential job applicants. So what I'm saying is somebody who doesn't have those skills or those badges might be filtered out in an early round, and I might not ever get to see Jarek with his 4.0 from Pepperdine because he wouldn't have had evidence that he has those specific skills. And I think, if you just Google skills-based economy, you'll be, stampeded by a flood of articles about how our economy is shifting rapidly toward a skills-based economy. But I'm not just talking about CTE courses, because I don't want to get trapped in that mindset that badges have to be for CTE, because they certainly are not. Let me head down the road of some of these other initiatives, because I do want to get to the point where we can talk about sort of where the rubber meets the road here. So grading in the modern era, or the modern Carnegie era, I should say, which is, yes, I realize, an oxymoron. So a passing student might have something like this. If you had 4 exams, you've got some homework, you got a paper, the exams are 15% each, homework is 20%, paper is 20%. If this student scored these following amounts, so in half of the exams of the class, they received a failing grade. Does this student, to you, demonstrate mastery of the subject matter? Because according to our current system of grading, despite these 2 scores, and let's face it, their paper wasn't that great either, they still get their 54 hours. If they sit in the seat for 54 hours, they still get a 72%, which is a C in the class, which means they get credit. which means according to our system, and we may look at their transcript and say, well, you only got a C in that class. But, you know, if there's not another applicant who's similar in every way, except they got an A in that class, I'd probably still have to hire the person with a C. Now, if we shift gears a little bit and we think about mastery, we establish a line of mastery like we do with assessment. And we start talking about things in a more granular way. How did the student do on these objectives? Did they achieve mastery? Yes, they achieved mastery. If they get to a point where they did not achieve mastery, we have the opportunity to assist that student in a personalized way. And this is a great application of personalized education and equity-based learning, because who knows which things a student will struggle with, but we can target that at a very specific level, and we can remediate that objective so that the student can demonstrate mastery. To me, that's a much better explanation of rigor than saying my class is really tough. You know, 35% of my students fail my class because my exams are so tough. That's what passes for rigor in this learning economy. And to me, that's not rigor. Rigor is when you push students to become the best version of themselves. You assist them and push them at the same time. So it's a push and a pull thing, but you're helping students become that through academic rigor, which is not just a really hard exam. So we go through the objectives, and each time a student fails to meet the standard of mastery, we give them the resources, the assistance that they need to achieve mastery. So that by the end of the class, we can see that on all of those objectives, the student has achieved a level of mastery. What's ideal for measuring that sort of mastery? Well, our existing assessment practices are pretty well suited for that, because what we're looking at is a level of mastery that's established, that we communicate to students, and that is assessed, hopefully, through very authentic, very direct methods. So we grant credit. So badges in the wild, let's look at this. At Bakersfield College, we develop badges, and for each class, we have a badge, and based on that, we're able to use the student learning outcomes and the objectives, because at Bakersfield College, as do all of you, we develop both of those things, and there's a relationship between those things. And from that, we use faculty input to derive a set of skills that when that student achieves that badge, those skills are then associated with that student. They can use those skills to search for employment. They could use them to transfer, provided that the target institution is capable of understanding the language of mastery and badges, which, you know, right now we've got some work to do. And they can use that skill set to advance in their own profession. So it's not just employment, it's promotability, it's professional development. And by the way, we're not only are we using badges for all of our academic credit, we're also using badging for all of our internal professional development, because we know that there's value to our employees in providing them a portable credential that they can take with them if they should apply for another job somewhere. We've added a lot of value for our employees at that point, because they can actually demonstrate in a verifiable way that they completed that work at Bakersfield College. So if we have a badge like this for each course in a program, and the student achieves all of those badges, then they are awarded a program level badge. And that badge pathway can be viewed and downloaded in any platform, including the Badger Backpack, which is a free platform. This is what it looks like. This is a view of what a single badge would look like. And you can see that it's got the little verified symbol, and it also has links, links that they can use to share that badge, to download it to their computer or phone. They can print a certificate that details the work of that badge. And they can also view the public page of their backpack, which they can share and organize as a virtual resume. We are also using Pathways Program Mapper at Bakersfield College, and we are pioneering the embedding of our badges into that. So students can actually see, as they complete courses and programs, what are the discrete skills they will gain, and what are the badges they will obtain. So let's talk about the educational journey. Let's go back to that institutional view of things. Right now, we have teaching at the center of things. Teaching leads to grades, which leads to a transcript. And by the way, in this picture, in this landscape, assessment is sort of going on as a side activity, right? It's not part of the student's learning journey. It's what we do as an institution. It's a accreditation requirement. It's useful for improving our teaching practice, but it doesn't really have anything to do with students in the end. And somewhere between the transcript and the rest of their life, the student is supposed to use those things to get employment or transfer. Nancy, I see your question about professional development badges. I don't have any on me, but if you email me after this, I'll send you what we have. We've got a ton. But somewhere between the transcript and employment, we have to use some guesswork and some luck and maybe a little bit of magic to help students make those connections, because the transcript really doesn't do it for them. And we haven't really built a continuum for students on their journey. What I'm proposing is, let's first start with learning and not teaching. And that might seem like I'm splitting hairs, but teaching is about the teacher. It's about the institution. Learning is about the student. So if we start with what the student needs to learn, then we're starting with the student. And that's the first step in real personalized, humanized teaching and learning. Then we move to assessment. Assessment is better than grades 99.5 times out of 100. Probably just 100. I hate to speak in absolutes, but it's just plain better. Let's be honest. Assessment has been much more reflective and much more intentional about getting to the heart of what students are actually learning in the class, which are those critical student learning outcomes and objectives that we've spent a lot of time thinking about. Grades are just a really bad proxy measure, and in grades and inequity go hand in hand, and it's a dysfunctional relationship that those two have that affects students in a negative way across the board. And I would venture to say even that our students in particular are vulnerable to the negative effects of grades. So you'll notice a distinct lack of grades in this transcript or this journey. So if we connect learning with assessment with badges, and those badges contain skills, then we have a continuum that connects learning with employment or transfer, which represents their entire institutional journey, right? They come to us as new students, and their learning journey starts with us. But their learning journey is not about self-actualization or personal improvement. It's about getting somewhere. They want to go somewhere. They want to go to a job, or they want to go to another institution. And so our job is to see them through that journey in a personalized way and land them in the best possible position to succeed in that next level. That's it. That's the thing for us. So this continuum is equity focused, it's student focused, and it's learning focused. And it really represents sort of the way we're envisioning the future of learning at especially the community college level, but really, why not all levels? So when we're talking about building a new structure, I talked about this a little bit earlier. We had the old structure, and what we need to do is build a scaffold next to the existing structure. We can't just throw away Carnegie units. Nobody will buy it. What we have to do is show people that this is really better. And the best way to do that is to build right next to it something better. It starts with high tech and high touch. We use technology not to do amazing things, and technology is amazing things. I mean, my son's a computer engineer, and is working for Microsoft this summer in artificial intelligence. And it's amazing, fun stuff, but it's not going to solve learning. Like, if there's a teacher out there that's worried about being replaced by a computer, don't worry about it, because the best thing that technology can do for us is allow us to see the individual in the mass of students. Bakersfield College, we've got 35,000 students. Technology is what we use to see the individual in the crowd. And we have to, that's how the technology can be high touch for us. We need to use humanized teaching. So we need to understand how people learn. We need to understand the equity issues, and we need to shape our teaching to optimize learning for a variety of different students. And those humanized techniques are second to none. We need to prepare students for a skills-based economy. But here's where the rubber meets the road, okay? And I'm just gonna be honest. We have to have curricular alignment. So whatever we're doing has to be aligned with the curriculum. Again, this cannot be a revolution where we just say, we're gonna burn the Carnegie unit and do something different. It will fail. We have to align this with our current curriculum. We have to show the path from A to B. Yeah, I think we have to show people how to get from one to the other. And we have to sort of keep the Carnegie unit training wheels on for a while, because we're just not, the world isn't ready for that kind of a revolutionary change. But we can make this evolutionary change happen. We just have to take these steps. And I would venture to say that direct assessment is going to play a direct role. And I'm not saying that everything's going to go to CBE. I'm not ready to say that yet, and I don't think it will happen. But I think one thing that CBE is bringing to the table for us is an enhancement of our assessment techniques, and also the idea that the results of assessment, rather than grading and proxy measures, the results of a direct assessment should be shared to students as feedback and as a measure of their success. And that's a critical thing. That's a shift that direct assessment is going to bring us. We've already got faculty at Bakersfield College who are saying, how can I integrate the feel of a direct assessment into a semester-based class? How can I use some of those things? We sat on my team. I have two faculty instructional designers. I walked into the office yesterday and they're on a conference call with somebody at Glendale College who is saying, hey, I want to do away with grades in my class. I know I still have to put grades on the transcript, but how can I use a direct assessment or a meaningful, authentic assessment mindset to approach that? It's a great conversation. It's really exciting, but we're making inroads there. And direct assessment, I think it has value. So eventually, if we do this right, we can let Carnegie units and grades sort of fade to the background, because competency and mastery will have taken its place. So building a badging infrastructure, and I love to see these images. I got to tell you that they're very exciting. We have a badge for every single course at Bakersfield College, and within the next month, we'll have completed a badge for every single program at Bakersfield College. And so this is just a sample. This is literally like one badge from each subject area, but it's so fun to see all of these and just think of all of the student learning that's sort of represented by those, right? So we're working on it. We're building the badges. So we created the images based on our catalog. We're aligning those images with skills. And to do that, we're using two things. We're using the MZ Skills database, which makes that connection to the workforce, to the workplace outside of BC, which is important. And it also gives us an open standard for relating those skills to other people, to other entities and people. And that's important because skills are used as a basis of communication. And if you just make up your own skills, that communication channel becomes blurry. So to focus that communication, we're using the MZ Skills database. And we're using faculty, of course, because again, you have to align this work with your curriculum. If it's not aligned to your curriculum, it doesn't make any sense, because your curriculum is what you're teaching. It contains your SLOs, it contains your course objectives. Aligning with curriculum allows you to actually put wheels on this thing. So we're aligning it with curriculum. Our assessment committee is deeply involved in the work and will continue to be deeply involved in the work of thinking through how we tie assessment to the awarding of badges. Keep in mind, we still have to use Carnegie units. We still have to issue grades. So we have to have some strategies for existing with one foot in both worlds. So we're developing those badges in Badger, which is the platform that we use to issue those. And we're developing the strategy for issuing those. The next step for us, and this is about the zone that we're in right now, the development and the aligning of SLOs and objectives and teaching methods and developing that whole ecosystem. But the next step for us will be education and marketing. Because if we're creating something that nobody understands, then it doesn't have the same value to students. So we're collaborating, we're reaching out. We're trying to collaborate with other colleges on how we can use badges and use them for exchanging information and communicating skills and things like that. We need to do some work with local industry so that local industry knows that they can ask our students for what badges they've earned and things like that. By this time next year, we will be awarding badges at the course and program level. And that's very exciting. It's going to be a clunky process at first, like most things are, but eventually it will be automated and smooth, fingers crossed, because that's a lot of badges. And of course, like we do in assessment, we will use these to cycle back and reflect on those things and provide a process of continuous improvement. Enrique, I see you, and I'll let you ask your question in just 1 second. I want to highlight a few things, structural elements that I call them guide rails that we're using as we do this badge work as sort of points of reference. So we're working in the CBE initiative at the state. We're in the pilot program and we're developing CBE, which is going to be beautiful because CBE programs are born for badges, right? They have competencies that are developed. Each one can be a badge. When you complete it, you get the program badge. There's a one-to-one assessment of those things. It's reflected back to students, and it's a neat little package. Applying badges to CBE programs is a slam dunk. Outside of that, there's a little more work that needs to be done. Competency-based education for CBE. Sorry, I took for granted that people were in the know about CBE, but competency-based education or direct assessment, if you want to do some research on that. We're working a lot with non-credit programs. Non-credit programs are a credit, no credit. Actually, they're no credits. It's like a pass, no pass situation. And that's another area where we have the ability to more focus on competency and mastery rather than a grade, because we don't issue grades in non-credit programs, and they have no Carnegie units associated with them. So it's sort of a nice way of thinking about teaching and learning using another metric, and that metric is badge, because we can provide a skills-based badge, because that's sort of the point of non-credit programs. And if you're tracking what's happened at the state level, you know that there's some legislation that's going to be coming up soon related to funding and increased funding for non-credit programs at the community colleges. So that's something to keep your eye on. We use credit for prior learning. Credit for prior learning is another great place to use badges as a way of quantifying that credit, because we don't give units for that either. And then transfer and articulation. We've had some early work and some early pilot work with other colleges around using badges as a way of looking into the content of course. So those are some of the things that we're working on it's a big complex project. And like I said, we have to approach it from several different angles at once. And I see that we're down to our last 5 minutes. I just have one more slide left that's very important for you all, because I want you all to feel accomplished. I'm going to give all of you a badge for being here today. And you get the stayed awake most of the time badge. Thanks for bearing with me on this, and I appreciate the interaction. I see there's lots of questions. If we don't have time to address those, please feel free to reach out. If you want examples of badges, we can absolutely provide those to you. And you know, we want to share and we want to collaborate, because the more of us that are exploring this and working on this problem, the more robust our solution is going to be. And so we want those challenges. We want to talk things through and go deep on this stuff. Here's my contact information. Let me see if I can address a couple of questions. Yeah, the example badges, if you want some of those, Amy, you can email me for those. And yes, I hope that badges will replace transcripts. That's my long-term vision that I like I said, I probably won't see it in my lifetime, but I sure hope so. And if you want a copy of the slide deck, please feel free to email me and I'll send you a copy of it. I think that's the questions that I see in the chat. Does anybody have any questions they want to shout out? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hi, Bill. Thank you. Jennifer, this is Jennifer. I'm the SLO coordinator at Cypress College. But thank you. This has been so helpful and full of information. My question is, because we do have badges that we use for our CTE programs, but for the other areas, my question is, can you do a badge just based on and I'm so sorry if you said this and I missed it, but per learning outcome, or in order to get the badge, you have to meet the standard for all learning outcomes in that class?
Well, right now at our basic level, we are awarding the badge for the class. And we are saying that if they pass the class, we are awarding the skills based on the learning outcomes. So we have we are not saying that they've achieved all the learning outcomes, but we are looking at the learning outcomes for the class to generate a skill set for that class. In an ideal world, if we were all using assessment as our primary way of determining whether a student mastered the subject matter in the class, we would be awarding a badge for each learning outcome, and the net effect of being awarded each of those badges would be the awarding of the class badge. And so they would stack up that way. We're just not there yet. And I would say that we're probably not there yet in the sophistication and use of our assessment as a real measure. But I'd sure like to get there eventually. That's definitely the goal.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, thank you so much. I don't even know where to start to summarize this. We'll stay in touch with you. What can I say? This is an ongoing discussion, and I certainly am keenly aware of your comments about this revolution versus evolution. Right? I think you're absolutely right. I'm just it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I guess that's my point. But then again, we have been talking about SLOs for about 10, if not 15 years, right? So it's about time we start paying attention to student learning and really putting students at the center. When you think of SLO, student learning outcome, the first word there is a student. If you're not teaching, what it is that students learn, then what are you teaching, right? If you're not assessing what it is that students are supposed to be learning, what are you assessing? So those are sort of like the guiding principles of our conversations here. So your comments about badging are certainly right on spot on. So thank you very much for the inspiration. We are on the right track, I suppose. And as you know, competency-based education is gaining some traction in the States. So let's make sure that we have our eyes and ears open to further developments on that end. Thank you very much for providing your contact information, and we'll stay in touch. I will go ahead and stop the recording.